Hey, can everybody hear me?
I can.
Okay, thank you, Patty.
I believe we're just waiting for Ludi, and I'm waiting for the link to be posted. So if you can all just hold tight for a couple more minutes.
Thanks, Patty.
I feel like we should do a question of the day every time we're just sitting around waiting.
Go for it.
Okay, question of the day. What can we do? Coffee or tea? Julian, coffee or tea?
Both.
Okay, does it matter the time of day?
No, I can drink it 5 minutes before bed and still fall asleep.
Okay. James, coffee or tea?
I'm both as well, although I would not be able to fall asleep if I drank coffee right before I fell asleep, went to bed.
Okay. We missed Ludi last time. Ludi, coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Coffee. Okay. Brianne, coffee or tea?
I don't believe in non-alcoholic beverages.
You're a tea drinker. You're not telling the truth. I
There's-
call fib.
Twisted tea.
Tom, coffee or tea?
Honestly, neither. I've never had a cup of coffee in my life, and I've probably only had maybe 2 or 3, maybe a half dozen cups of tea. I'll drink juice or water or soda or something, but not those.
Okay, Kathy, I know the answer, but I'm asking you anyway. Coffee or tea?
That would be tea.
Tea, knew it. Ron, coffee or tea?
I'm pretty close to Tom. Neither, mostly water and maybe some orange juice. Don't want to get dehydrated.
Okay, Samantha, coffee or tea?
Coffee. All of the coffee.
All the time. IV drip of coffee. I'm with you. Phil,
I drink tea.
tea. All right, who am I missing? We never ask Patty. Patty, are you a coffee drinker or a tea drinker?
Coffee only.
Coffee only. All right. I love coffee, but I love tea. If I have a choice, it'll almost always be coffee.
Got time for another question?
I don't know. Patty, are we still waiting on YouTube?
Yeah, we're still waiting for the link to be posted. Yep, we're all set now. So we're good to go. Whoever, I think it's James tonight.
Yes, that's correct. All right, thanks, Patty. So before we get started, just make sure somebody lets me know if I start cutting in and out, so I can, so I know that you can't hear me. Otherwise, I'm just gonna talk. So let's get to the first item on the agenda, which is the approval of last week's meeting. Rian sent those out ahead of time. rather than go through and see if anybody has, if each one of us has discussion, does anybody have any discussions or corrections that they want to put forth? All right, hearing none, let's move to a vote for the approval of the 5/20/20 minutes. Kathy,
Yes.
actually, I think technically we need a motion, so I'll move to approve the minutes. I need a second.
I'll second.
All right, perfect. Sorry, getting ahead of myself. So Kathy, again, how do you vote?
Yes.
Julian,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
James is a yes. Hillary,
Yes.
Ariane,
Yep.
Sam,
Yes.
Ludi,
Yes.
and Phil.
Yes.
All right, perfect. Let's go to item number two, approval of the charter amendments, where we took the last vote or the vote last meeting. I will go through and see if anybody has discussion on that. But do I have a motion to approve the charter amendments?
So moved, Julian Payne.
All right, thanks, Julian. Second. All right, thank you. Kathy, discussion.
I still have a problem with, it's so open-ended about the post-secondary educational background, but other than that, nothing else.
Okay. Julian,
Nope, looks good to me.
Tom,
Nothing.
Ron,
Yes, is this the time I state whether any of these I have a no on, or is this later?
and you say that again?
Okay, are we going to go through these one at a time? Or is this a blanket? Oh,
Yeah, it's a voting as a block. So you can talk about any of them right now. Anything in the charter revisions.
yes, because I have no on two of these, which I said no when we talked last week.
Oh, you talking about the minutes, Ron?
No, I'm talking about the amendments we're taking up now. The one that I agreed with Mike Roy on, and about the wording being appropriate, change to acting.
Oh, okay. I see what you're saying. So, so which one is this? Which amendment is it?
Well, there's two separate ones. It's the second one down on the first page, IM 57. I would have to know this week like I did last week. And at the top of the second page, IN 125, another no.
Okay. Anything else to add, Ron?
No, that's it.
Okay. I don't have anything. Hillary?
So I don't, but I was going to say if we're voting as a block, maybe it would be good to parse those two out, because if Ron supports the other ones, we don't necessarily want it on the record as him not supporting them. Does that make sense?
Sure. So, Ron, you said that your issues were with RN 57, and
That is correct.
And any other ones?
Yes, the top of the second page, the wording, changing what we originally have in the charter, changing the word appropriate to acting, that's 125.
125. Okay. So does whoever originally made the motion want to amend it to approve all of the other, or I guess just exclude those two amendments from this particular motion?
Yes, I'll make a motion to exclude those two amendments.
All right. Anything else to add, Hillary?
No, that was it. Thank you.
Rianne?
No, I've got nothing.
Sam?
Nothing to add.
Ludi,
I'm good.
and Phil.
Good.
All right, so let's move to a vote, and then just to be clear, this is a vote on approving the language of all of the amendments except RN 69 and RN 125. Kathy,
Yes.
No. It's RN 57, not RN 69. It's RN 57 and RN
Oh, yes.
125.
What was it, Rian?
It's, okay, can I get them both on one screen? It's RN 57 and RN 125 are the two that we're not taking as a block.
Okay, 125 kind of faded out there, so thank you.
yes, thank you, Rianne. Julian,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
James is yes. Hillary,
Yes.
Rianne,
Yes.
Sam,
Yes.
Ludi,
Yes.
and Phil.
Yes.
All right,
What was,
perfect.
what was Kathy's vote, James? Did Kathy vote?
Yes, she voted first. She was a yes. Correct me if I'm wrong, Kathy.
No, correct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so so can I have a motion to approve RN 57 and RN 5025, and then we can get into discussion.
So moved.
All right, is there a second? I'll second it. Kathy, any discussion on those two particular ones?
No, definitely not.
Julian,
No.
Tom,
No.
and Ron?
No, my stance is still the same as it was last week on 57 as well as 125.
Okay. I don't have anything. Hillary,
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Rianne,
I'm good.
and Sam,
I'm good.
Ludi,
I'm good.
Phil.
Nothing.
All right. Let's move to a vote. Kathy,
Yes.
Julian,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Ron,
No.
James is a yes. Hillary,
Yes.
Rianne,
Yes.
Sam,
Yes.
Ludi,
Yes.
Phil.
Yes.
All right, excellent. So let's move to item 3A, Subcommittee C report out. And I know Hillary was the one who did some work on this, others in the subcommittee as well. So I'm going to turn it over to Hillary and give her the floor.
All right. So the purpose of our subcommittee looking at other towns and cities was that we don't have currently in our charter anything that really outlines how we are to function as a city government in times of emergencies. And so we thought it might be worthwhile to look at what other cities are doing to sort of give us some ideas. So what I put together and sent to you was ridiculously long, sorry. I just wanted to sort of illustrate how varied they can be. And I'd love to just get a general feel from everyone on their sense of what they think it should look like for Waterville. I think for towns or cities that have it outlined in great detail, kind of like Augusta, even Bangor, and Brunswick, I personally like the definitions. I like the explanations. I think about when we have any kind of emergency, it just makes it easier for the people who have to do the work to not have to worry about how they do it or who does what. So I personally would lean towards possibly even an entirely separate section for our charter as we were looking at these. And I don't know that I made it clear in the report. There are some that clearly have like one section put aside. That was easy for me to locate, and that's what you want. There were others that had like a paragraph or a section here and a section there. I found that complicated. So I'm just thinking, again, in times of emergency, I think it would be handy to have everything sort of clearly defined and outlined and in one section, so that if we have a pandemic like we do now, if there's a terrorist attack, if there's something of the like, that people who are serving can go to the charter as guidance of how we are to function and go from there. But that's not my decision. It's for us to kind of discuss together. But it's a lot of information to take in. But I wanted you to see, you know, Winslow, Biddeford have very, very little. And if the majority feels like that's the better way to go, then I'd support that. So that was the first thing that we were supposed to report on and discuss, and I think it's probably best to keep them separate. So that's all I have to add.
James, could I add something to what Hillary just gave an overview of?
Sure, go ahead.
I would, you know, I looked through the report, and I just would ask you to note that these are all ordinances within these communities and not actually embedded into the charter. So I think that's an important distinction to make, because the charter, as you know, is very difficult to change. So it may be prudent, if you will, to add something in the charter, maybe under the city council or something, saying that, you know, there will be an emergency ordinance created and established or whatever, and then put this, whatever language you come up with, actually into the code of ordinances as its own chapter, so that it can be amended easily by the city council.
Thank you, Patty. I neglected to say that. It's a really good point.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I guess, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think anybody's prepared to put forth a motion on this issue today. So I guess I would propose tabling this until next week, and then, you know, basically whomever wants to prepare a motion for this emergency provisions issues, then we can do that next week and further discuss it.
James, if I might add this, though, I think, and I mean, you know, the group might feel very differently than I do, and there may be some wisdom in tabling this, but I do think that Patty makes some good sense. And that is that maybe what we just do is we just kind of put something into the charter that creates an impetus for the council to you know, create some emergency powers, to create an ordinance. And if all we do today is you know, if someone were to make a motion just today to just simply say something to the effect of, you know, the city council shall effectuate an emergency ordinance, you know, I'm sure someone can probably be a little bit more artful with the language than I am, but that may suffice. That may solve what we're trying to do. I don't know if anybody feels differently, but we might be able to save ourselves a step. That's just some food for thought.
Well, Tom, if you're making that motion, I'll second it.
All right, so Rian, I'm happy to make that motion and go out with that, unless you or someone else says, well, look, Tom, this is a little bit more artful way to put it forth, and then we can discuss it. If someone's got something more artful, that's fine. Otherwise, I'm happy to make that motion.
No, I think just a motion saying, like, directing the city council to create an emergency provisions ordinance is all we need.
Then I will make that motion.
And I'll go ahead and second it.
Okay, let's have discussion. Kathy.
So we make that, but back to what Hillary was saying, that we really should have a defined chapter within the charter also. Is that correct?
So that
I-
would be my suggestion, but we can go around with what they've proposed and go from.
Well, no, excuse me, I do agree with Hillary that there should be a defined chapter. So there are specific instructions instead of leaving it so open at a time like that. I just think it would be very wise to have a defined chapter.
Okay, thank you. Julian?
Yeah, James, I just have a few questions for you. What is the reason for tabling it tonight?
Well, I didn't know if anybody was prepared to make a motion on this, but since we are, then I guess the motion to table is moot at this point.
Okay, that's what I was wondering, yeah. And it's my understanding, just to address Patty's concerns, that we really don't want it written in the charter per se, because then it is hard to remove or amend. So it would be better suited for an ordinance. But if it's only going to be an ordinance, is that something the Charter Commission addresses? Do we even need to address that if it's an ordinance?
I might be able to
Right.
respond to that.
Yeah,
Is that all right, James?
Yeah, go ahead, Patty. Yeah.
I think what the Charter Commission could do is, you can add, if, as Kathy said, you can certainly add a section that's about emergency procedures or whatever, a different article, if you will. And it can say things in there like, that the city council has to adopt an ordinance by a certain date or whatever. And then the ordinance can become a separate section of the code of ordinances. But once that happens, then you could certainly take these examples that the subcommittee has developed, and once you have a chance to review them more thoroughly, you could certainly recommend to the council through your final report, which is what the last Charter Commission did with the Ethics Commission, I recall, send the council some directives to create this separate ordinance and say that we recommend that you model this city or town, and that may suffice. Then they can start that as a working document.
right. Okay. And I haven't had a chance to read it. It came in, I think, yesterday or today, and it wasn't enough time for me. Just my day was taken up. But it's definitely something that I think is going to be difficult, because who has the powers? Is it the mayor? Is it the city manager? Is it the council? What if the powers are overriding federal laws or guidelines and we overstep in some way? So I definitely think it's going to be an interesting discussion. Thank you.
Thanks, Julian. Tom, do you want to say anything?
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Ron?
Yes, I would agree with tabling it, and I would hope that we can have a good discussion with the mayor and Mike Roy and the councilors. We do realize what happened this year. Waterville was on the front page of all of the main media papers. The lawyer had the articles in there pertaining to freedom of access. And I think that the people that really should be in on this, whether alone or with us, would be the mayor and the councilors. And as I say, I'm certainly not prepared this evening to make any decision on this until we get more input in it.
Thanks, Ron. I'll go next. I'm in support of Tom's motion. I think that it should basically just be a reference to that the city council shall come up with an ordinance. Because I'm not, I don't know exactly what happened. I'm not a historian on recent events, but I believe what happened was there was no direction in the charter or ordinance in terms of like what happens in an emergency. But I think since then, the city council has passed an ordinance that lays out the process. And so my inclination would be to basically keep it short, and I think this motion definitely works, and I'm going to vote in favor of it. Hillary?
Thank you. So good idea, Tom. I think the problem with an emergency situation, and Kathy, you and I've talked about this before, the problem is that it can change so quickly. And I think that's what Patty's suggesting, that if we put something really hard and fast together in the charter, it may not apply. And so we don't want to box anyone in, but we do want to provide guidance. That's really what it should do. So I think what Tom is suggesting is the ability to allow essentially the council to set this up. And I say allow, the charter would require them to have an emergency ordinance. I guess the wording is what we'll have to work out. But I think that allows for a lot of different emergency situations. I guess I kind of like to see it defined a little bit, so that we're clear what scenarios we're talking about, but I don't think that has to be at length either. So Kathy, sorry, I might be changing my mind here, but I think I'm inclined to agree with Tom on this.
Thanks, Hillary. Rhiannon?
Yeah, Patty touched on this with the ethics article. So, Article 6 of the Code of Ethics is right now just 2 sections that is saying that an ordinance is required that defines the code of ethical conduct. And then interestingly, it also says that there is the formation of the ethics committee would be the other section. And, to be honest, this is really what I'm envisioning is following along with what's going on with the Code of Ethics here, where it's codified into the charter that we must have an emergency ordinance, we must have an emergency plan. We can review the emergency plan every couple of years and adjust, things if they need changing. But I also, I was running through what Subcommittee C had sent over, and a couple of them don't call out pandemics at all. And so I worry that if we codify into the charter, we're going to miss a scenario. Whereas if we just instead direct the council and mandate them to have an ordinance, they're able to adapt to whatever changes happen in the world that maybe were not anticipated. So I support this motion, and I would model it very much after how the Code of Ethics article is currently structured.
Thanks, Rhiannon. Sam?
I don't have anything to add. I support Tom's motion, and I think I would agree with everything that Rhiannon just said.
Thanks, Sam. Ludi?
Pretty much ditto. I'm also in favor of Tom's motions for a lot of the reasons already stated. Yeah, I think that the charter should codify that there should be a plan in place, but it allows the council to actually come up with a plan and adapt. And I do agree with Rhiannon that it'd be great to model it off of how the Code of Ethics is structured. So yeah, I don't have anything really new to add.
Thanks, Ludi. Phil?
Nothing to add.
All right, thanks, Phil. All right, let's take a vote on Tom's motions.
Jake,
Starting.
Do you have
Yes.
time
Yep.
for a quick question?
Sure.
So would Bill Lee obviously look over the legality of this ordinance as well and make sure there's nothing that could get us in trouble legally?
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean,
Yeah. I'm
yeah.
sorry.
Bill will take a look at our final product,
Okay.
and if we have anything in there that's illegal, he will certainly let us know, because we can't put forth to the voters something that is illegal. In terms of like obviously, if the city council passes an ordinance, I'm sure he takes a look at that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. All right. So moving to a vote, Kathy,
Yes.
Julian,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
James is a yes. Hillary,
Yes.
Rhiannon,
Yep.
Sam,
Yes.
Ludi,
Yes.
Phil.
Yes.
Thank you. All right. item number 2 under the subcommittee report out. Do you have anything for that, Hillary?
Yeah, I mean, not a printed report. And I would say not as an exhaustive report as what we did for this, but I can tell you that I looked at various city charters, and I want to bring something up just to reference. So in other charters, the language seems to be pretty standard about whether it's counselors or mayors or school board members could lose their office if they're convicted of a felony or crime involving theft, dishonesty, or moral turpitude. That's the kind of thing that we have in ours already. I found one charter that talked about prior convictions being an exclusion if you want to apply to be in the police or the department or the fire department. That makes sense. Or a counselor, I guess one other charter I saw found something that included, murder. I think that the language that we have sort of covers all of that. I'm trying to go back to our conversation that we had that prompted this. And this was, did we want to adopt stronger language about excluding anyone with a prior conviction? And again, it wasn't exhaustive, but I didn't find anything that seemed to have that as a model. Which doesn't mean we can't do it. I just didn't see that with any sort of regularity in anybody else's charter.
Okay, thank you very much, Hillary. All right, so we'll move on to the next item, Article 7, City Finances. And I believe we have the City Finance Director on the line.
Yep, I'm on the line.
All right, excellent. How you doing?
Good.
So there was a number of suggested revisions that came out of your office, and I think basically we just wanted to give you a chance to sort of articulate and expound upon the reason for the suggested revisions.
Okay. The specifically which revisions are you talking about? I'm looking at the sheet, Article 7 Finance, 5, 6, and 7. Is that the revisions you're looking at, or is it bigger?
It's the ones that I'm sharing on the screen right now. I don't know if you called in or if you can see my screen.
Actually, I called in, so I can't see your screen.
It's all of the revisions in Section 9. Removing the requirement to send quarterly updates to the school board and council, remove the term limit requirement for school board and council members, and then removing the requirement to meet at least quarterly.
The reasons the changes I'm putting forth are to be in line with what reality is today. And I spoke to Mike. He's been here 16 years or so, and he said he's never had the finance committee present any financial statements to the council. It's all been through the finance director, and I am consistent with that, supplying the council with financial information on and it's as needed basis. So Article 7 Finance, 5, it's on as needed basis. It's updated through me. I'm just reading my notes. Article 7 Finance, 6, term council members removed because the finance committee is on a need basis, on an as needed basis. And Section 7, but no less than quarterly, is not needed because meetings are on an as needed basis. So having those removed reflects reality on the ground and what has been done in the past.
James, can I ask a question?
Sure.
So what you're saying is that you've been meeting at an as needed basis, and Mike Roy is saying that in all of his years here, they've never met quarterly. But the
No,
current charter.
What I'm saying is the city council has been updated with financial information through my office, the finance director's office. It hasn't gone through a finance committee, and the finance committee meets as needed. For example, when we were putting forth the bond issue last year, we met. When the budget was being worked on, the finance committee met, but again, it was as needed, and that's how it has been for at least 16 years, if not longer. I don't know who actually put in that language, from whether it was the last revision for the charter or before. But the reality is the finance director is the person, my office is responsible for submitting information directly to the council, not the finance committee. Therefore, the changes were necessary to reflect that.
Okay, thank you. So it seems like the last charter didn't address this or possibly added these in. I'd ask Patty if she knows which one is the case, but it seems like you haven't been compliant with the charter, whether it was put in 7 years ago or left in 7 years ago.
The idea that the idea that the finance committee is responsible to update is not correct. It's the finance director that is the person who is responsible from way back when to now to supply financial information. That's the way it's been. Whether it's compliant or not, the changes need to change. The charter has to change to reflect that reality.
So can I ask a follow-up question? Are you sending the profit and loss statement and balance sheet of both departments, as well as similar information from any school administrative unit of which the city is a member?
Yes.
Okay. I think I get what you're saying, because that is covered under section 2B.
Right.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
James?
Does anybody else have any questions?
Yes.
Go ahead.
What is the finance director referring to when he says remove term limit requirements for school board and council members?
I'm reflecting the fact that it's an as needed. It's as needed. Therefore, there isn't any specific person that's on the committee that has a term limit. I mean, It's as needed.
Yeah.
It's not. If there was let's say a standing committee that met specifically, it would make sense. However, since it's as needed, there's a group of people who come together for the committee.
Sure. Yeah.
But again, it's
add on
as
to
needed.
that a little bit. Could I add on to that, James, just for a moment? This is Patty.
Yeah, go ahead, Patty.
It's not necessarily a term limit that's mentioned in section 9. It's talking about the term of the members on the finance committee. And it says that they're going to be 1 year. But what we've tried to do in the past is, once they've made recommendations for people to serve on the finance committee, we let that term be coterminous with that council member or board of education member's term on that board.
Okay.
So rather than make it 1 year and rotate through a new person every year, they let that one person on either the council or the board of education stay on for their term, so that they're not, reinventing the wheel every year, if you will.
personally, I'd like to hear from the city manager, the mayor, and the council chair as to their opinion about removing this before we do it, because once it's done, we can't add it back. We had the same issue on the school board where we weren't presenting, my memory, we weren't presenting quarterly reports to the council, or I think it was a yearly report to the council. And we had quite a debate amongst ourselves and with the superintendent. And it was a unanimous decision, I think, of 8 people to remove it. So I think I'd like a little more guidance on it. And sometimes it's state law that you have to present these quarterly to council. So I'm a little worried about just blanketly removing it until I think we have more information on it. I don't know if anyone else feels the same, but thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions?
James, I've got my hand raised.
Yes, you do. Go for it, Hillary.
Okay, so I'm not looking to be critical. I'm just looking to clarify something that Rhiannon sort of said very clearly. The desire to have it reflect what you're doing is one thing, but that's totally separate from what the charter stipulates. So if I'm understanding correctly, we're not doing what the charter says. Now, is that a reason to remove it? Maybe. I mean, should it be removed? Maybe. But I'm quite concerned to hear that our charter says one thing and that that's not happening in practice. Do I understand that correctly, Aaron?
Yes, you do. However, the reality is it's an as-needed system. I am presenting financial information to the council regardless of the finance committee.
Right.
And in my opinion, those items that I struck should be removed. It's not as if the city council is not going to get the financial information. They are. It's, in my opinion, layer upon layer upon layer of just bureaucratic tape just to get the same information.
And I
have a direct
appreciate that.
relationship.
Yeah, I absolutely appreciate that. And I don't want you to misunderstand. I'm not saying that it shouldn't be you that does it. I'm just saying we don't get to decide that it is you because we feel like it needs to be that way. We have to be in compliance with the charter. So if we're not doing this, and it's not our job to enforce it either. We're just looking at the charter. So we can make those changes.
And you have to realize, for Mike Roy's tenure, this hasn't occurred. Before his tenure, I don't know when it actually took place. I know the previous finance directors didn't follow the charter, and the financial information still flowed to the city council, the commission, the finance committee met on occasion when needed. So it's not as if the information is not being disseminated. It is. And I struck them because I feel that the history reflects that it hasn't taken place. Information's still flowing. It's just another layer to navigate through, which, in my opinion, should be taken out.
Right. And again, I'm not disagreeing with that. What I'm saying is there was a reason for it initially. Just because we're not following it doesn't mean that there isn't a reason for it. I'm trying to even figure out why it was there to begin with then. So
I honestly don't know.
But I'm wondering if it was a checks and balance kind of thing. If it was intended.
In my opinion, balances still are in place because the counselors are still getting the information that they require.
Well, I'm wondering if it was, twofold. Checks and balances certainly for city councilors to get information, but I wonder if the finance committee was to have more than just a few people involved with that information. Yeah.
I couldn't tell you that. I do want to bring up the point that there is an audit that occurs every year. It's an annual audit. So if there are any problems, they would surface through that outside audit.
Sure. And let me ask you, so, and I think Patty's right about this, there isn't anything that actually says term limits. But it does say members serving on the finance committee shall be 1 year. And Patty, if I understand you, that's also not happening.
Correct.
Okay. Okay, so that, yeah, that's just, it's a totally different discussion. I want it noted. I find it concerning, but it's not my job to enforce it. But it does, I guess, allow us to have a discussion about why this is here and if we want to get rid of it or change it. Thank you, Aaron.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Hillary. Aaron, this is James Liberty. I've got a question, or maybe it's more of just if you can confirm that I sort of understand this. So right now our charter, Section 9 of Article 7, has a provision that essentially creates a finance committee, and it tells us who the members of that finance committee are. But it doesn't have anything that says, all right, the finance committee shall meet on a monthly basis or a quarterly basis or what have you. And as you're saying, they meet on an as needed basis. So,
right.
So am I correct? It's kind
James,
of like
James, Section
yeah.
9. Section 9 says the finance committee shall present quarterly financial reports to the city council and the board of education. So it does have in there that they do. It then also does say the finance committee shall meet as needed, but no less than quarterly. So it is in there that they send quarterly reports and that they meet at least quarterly.
Okay. Yes. Yep. You're right. But basically, Aaron, you're getting this same information, this profit and loss statement and balance sheet of the departments. You're getting that to city council pursuant to basically your charge, one of which your powers and duties, one of which is to submit to the city council through the city manager a monthly statement of all receipts and disbursements.
I give them a P&L and on a quarterly basis. And again, it doesn't reflect any other changes. If the finance committee meets, let's say, to give you the information, it's the same information that I would give to the finance committee. It's another layer that is unnecessary, and it just prevents direct dialogue with me, the finance director.
Yeah, I think I understand where you're coming from. That it's simply just another layer. You give the information to the finance committee gives it to city council. Why don't you just give it to the city council yourself?
It doesn't make sense, and that's one, I guess, the primary reason why I don't know why it was written to begin with, but it's just another level that is just shouldn't be there.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions?
Yes,
for
I have.
Aaron?
I have my
Kathy?
hand up. I have my hand
Sorry.
up.
Yeah, you do. Sorry, Kathy. Go ahead.
Well, I agree with Julian regarding checking any state statute. I agree with Hillary that I am concerned it was put here for a reason. And I guess I have the question for Patty about.
Do you know why the reason behind it was? I don't know what the reason behind it is, to be quite honest. I mean, if I was sitting in your shoes, I would eliminate as much double and triple kids as possible. And this is part of having a duplicate service. It's wasting time among all the committee members to sit there, and I give it to the committee, and then the committee then gives it to the council. It's a colossal waste of time when I'm still giving the same information directly to the council.
James?
You want to streamline government as much as possible. This is an opportunity to streamline government within your powers.
Kathy, do you have any other questions?
Yes, my last question was for Patty regarding the statement, the Board of Education and the City Council members serving on the Finance Committee shall be 1 year.
I actually struck those, so if you want to ask me additional questions, I'll be happy to answer them, Patty.
Well, Patty was giving us some historical background. That's why I was asking Patty.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, that they have in fact continued to reappoint the same people on the Finance Committee for the Board of Education and the City Council. So they've pretty much become coterminous with their seat on the Board of Education. So, you know, they can do the appointment annually, but they have a tendency to appoint the same people over and over again. So
Patty, if I'm on the City Council and I've been on there for 15 years, you're telling me I would be on that committee for 15 years?
not necessarily, because we look at those appointments every year as part of the council orientation process in January. And Mike Roy and the mayor reach out to the counselors and say, we've got these boards that need counselors on, who wants to serve on them? And a lot of times the same people will come forward and say, yeah, I've been on the TIF committee, I want to stay on the TIF committee, or I want to be on the finance committee or whatnot.
Okay, I just have a problem with the same person being on that. That could be there for 15 years. So
Right. I understand.
Thank you, Patty, for that
You're welcome.
background.
Yep.
Hillary, you got your hand up.
Yeah, Aaron, are you still there?
I'm still here.
Great. Well, last question. Remove the requirement to meet at least quarterly. May I ask why a quarterly meeting of the Finance Committee isn't necessary?
Again, it's on an as-needed basis. If we don't need to meet, simply because I'm going to supply the council direct information, it's as needed.
But you keep throwing something in there that's not in part of the charter. The charter says to meet quarterly, not as needed. So I'm asking, what might those meetings involve that would be different than just passing on information to the council? I guess that's my question.
A finance committee would be convened to talk about a bond issuance, a budget issue. Again, it hasn't, a finance committee hasn't been convened in my tenure for those two items. That's it.
Okay.
Prior to that, I can't speak to, but according to Mike Roy, the finance committee has not been put together and for the purpose as you see in the charter.
Yeah, I guess that was my question.
James?
Yes, Julian.
Yeah, I agree with Hillary's point that really we shouldn't really fit the charter to what hasn't been done. I would like to make a motion to table this pending the advice from Mike Roy and possibly mayor or finance committee or the council chair. I'm not comfortable liking this until I really understand why. I'd really like to hear from the head of the food chain in this before we make an irreversible change, in my opinion. So I'll propose that motion if anyone would like to second that.
I second it.
All right, let's move to discussion on the motion to table. Kathy?
For all the reasons that Julian just said, I think we should table it and not rush into this.
Julian?
Yeah, I won't elaborate much other than I'm concerned about state statutes. And I also like the idea of the council being prepared quarterly because a lot of times they're looking at goals down the road. I think there's a reason it was in there, and I'd really like to hear from the top of the food chain before we cross it off the charter. Thank you.
John?
Yeah, James, if I can just ask, I just want to get a clarification from Julian. Julian, is your concern about going forward why this hasn't been followed?
Yeah,
or why it was put in there in the first place?
Why it's in there in the first place, why it hasn't been followed, and really, you know, the head of the city really should persuade us why to remove it rather than his department heads, because it is a big deal removing it. And I'd also like to see how it fits into state statute. I'm sure it's not in there just for fun. There must be some safety check or balance. And we had this issue on the school board, but we had a long debate with the chair and the superintendent and the board members, and we decided to strike our portion that asked Eric to present to the council, and we had good reason for it. But this seems even more legal jargon than what we were talking about. So once it's struck off, we can't get it back in for 7 years, and we might be in violation of state law. Those are my concerns. Thank you.
Well, Julian, I can't speak to the why it was put in there in the first place, but I do think that Aaron has been clear as to why it hasn't been followed, and that is that simply he and his department and perhaps his predecessors just didn't think it was necessary to follow. They didn't think it was efficient. Is that correct, Aaron, or am I misstating that?
No, it's not realistic the way it's written. It's a waste of time for the finance committee members to convene on a quarterly basis. I say, here's quarterly results. Do you have any questions? Well, no, you're the finance director. But it just doesn't make sense that it's in there. It's a complete waste, in my opinion, and it's not streamlined government. You have to streamline government. It has to be efficient, and it's not efficient. It's one layer upon another, when the basic premise is to get the council information. And I'm doing that already without the use of however many people are in a finance committee. That's where I'm coming from. That's the reason why I struck those items out. I feel very, very strongly that they don't belong there. And I feel very, very strongly that you need to streamline this process. And you have the opportunity to do so with striking those items.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. So for my part, I mean, what I will say is this, is that, you know, as far as the discussion on this issue goes, is I will say that I completely agree with streamlining government. I completely agree with being as efficient as you can, frankly, probably in every part of every facet of our lives. I think that makes perfect sense. Redundancies don't make sense and they are inefficient. The thing that I will mention and I will caution, you know, us all about is this, is that there are always rules that are in all parts of our lives. And James, I think you can relate to that when it comes to the rules of civil procedure that may or may not make a lot of sense to us, that we may or may not agree with. Unilaterally disobeying them because we don't agree with them is probably not the right way to do this. If we've got a problem with the way something's written, then we take it to the Charter Commission, we take it to the City Council, we take it to whatever our government is. In James, in my case, we take it to a judge, and we fix it that way. So I would caution us all against making a change to a charter simply because it hasn't been followed. I'm not saying that making the change is wrong. Matter of fact, I think it's probably right, but I can't necessarily say that I agree with the way things have been done.
Ron.
Yes, I agree with Julian. My philosophy has been and always will be, when in doubt, not to change it. And I would like to get more information before I did even consider changing it.
Thanks, Ron. Myself, I would say that after hearing Aaron, sort of articulate on the basis of these suggested revisions, I would be in support of them. Whether or not they've been followed, is probably outside of our purview as charter commissioners. We're trying to sort of make a path forward that's more efficient. But I do understand it's a lot. If you haven't looked at it until tonight, or obviously none of us have talked with Aaron until tonight, it is a lot of information to come in. But I think, or to take in. But I think that once people get a chance to sort of digest it, I think they're going to see the reasonableness behind it. So I do understand why people would want an extra chance to just to catch up on the info. Hillary.
Yeah, I think I'll just sort of repeat what I said before and echo Tom. I agree with Aaron that if we can get rid of redundancies, we should do so. And a lot of times it's really hard to identify those redundancies unless you're the person who's sort of dealing with them day in, day out. He is. So I appreciate that, and I'm empathetic to it. I think in my mind, what makes sense is if he really, I mean, I'm not sure that it makes sense to have the finance committee give the report. I think it's totally reasonable for the finance director to give the report. So I'm leaning towards that revision. But the other two, I'm sincerely unclear about. And so I guess I'm with Julian. I want a little bit more information, and that doesn't mean that they shouldn't be removed, but just the notion that we should remove it because we're not following it isn't enough of a reason for me to remove it. And James, as you said, it's not our job to enforce it, but it's also not our job to change it to meet the reality. That doesn't mean that it shouldn't be changed, but the argument to meet reality isn't an argument enough. I would actually argue that if we're going to put people on the finance committee, Patty, it's entirely possible that somebody could be elected one year, but a position on the finance committee not open the next year if we're filling them by people's terms. So I understand why that 1 year is there. We're not following it. It prevents other people with opportunities to do that. In terms of the quarterly meetings, again, that's why I asked Aaron. I would like to hear from people who've served on the finance committee to have a better sense for their take on this, and then I'd be happy to vote on it.
Thank you, Rian.
I'm against the motion to table. I think we've already tabled this once, and we decided we wanted to hear from the Director of Finance as to his reasonings for why he wanted these changes. And I just want to say, like, Aaron, I'm really glad that you're here and kind of laid it out. It really helped to have you kind of talk about why you were suggesting these changes. And to the point of, Tom's point about like bringing, us to fix, and this should go through the proper channels. I think Aaron suggesting these changes was the proper channels for us to look at it and evaluate whether it was needed. I do also agree with James that we are not here to render judgment on whether or not the whole compliance issue. I think Aaron's actually done a very good job of explaining why we haven't been in compliance. And, hearing from him, it really does seem like section, in Article 7, Section 2D, which we did just amend to say a quarterly statement, really does cover what Aaron's looking for. And I would hate to have Board of Education members or even City Council members be forced to attend a meeting quarterly that isn't needed. And so I just, I guess I'm hesitant about what the motion to table would really accomplish. Except for that, we want the mayor to weigh in. But, you know, last week we decided that we wanted the finance director to weigh in on why he was proposing these changes. I think he's really laid out his case very strongly. And I just think adding more voice to this is unnecessary at this point. I mean, I was going to motion to accept the first and the third motion and leave in place that term limit of 1, you know, based on what Kathy said, or based on what Patty said in regards to Kathy's concern of every year when there's a new council, they do sit down and discuss who, you know, should be serving on what committee. And having that 1-year term limit really does force the council to go, okay, it's been a year, who's sitting on finance committee, who's not sitting on finance committee. So I see no problems leaving that, but I really do understand what Aaron's getting at with reducing this redundancy. I don't think that asking anybody else to talk to us is going to give us any more new information. You know, and I would actually make a motion to add to section 2D that the report does need to include the profit and loss statement and the balance statement of the school and city. So I don't know that we're going to gain any more information from tabling this. That's all.
Thank you, Sam.
Nothing to add.
Thank you, Ludi.
I don't really have a whole lot to add. I really appreciate Aaron being here and offering his input. It took me a while to digest everything until just now. So I do understand streamlining the government and making it more efficient and avoiding those redundancies. But I also understand the need to digest it some more because it took me so long to get here. I don't know. I'm kind of on the fence here with tabling it because Rian did make some really good points that, like, I don't know exactly what more other people can add. And Aaron gave some really reasonable justifications. And we did already table it. But I understand how tough it was to digest all of it. And I'm still in that process. So yeah, that's just my thought process.
Thanks, Ludi. Phil.
Nothing else.
All right. Vote on Julian's motion. Kathy.
Yes.
Julian.
Yes.
Tom.
Yes.
Ron.
Yes.
James is a no. Hillary.
Yes.
Rian.
I'm a no.
Sam.
No.
Ludi.
Yes.
And Phil.
Yes.
All right, so the motion passes, so we'll table this to the following meeting. I do think it's going to come up again, but Aaron, much appreciated for you to be on the line, and I think that if anybody has any further questions for you, they will certainly follow up by email or phone.
Great. And I'm glad to have been able to talk and express the reasoning behind it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay.
All right, so moving on to the next item on the agenda, Article 9, elections. There was a suggestion by Patty/Bill, so I'm gonna give Patty a chance to sort of explain the background on this suggestion.
Thank you, James. Yeah, there was an inquiry recently about how someone would be able to run for a seat, which elected seat on the Kennebec Water District Trustees Board without party affiliation. So in the past, they've always run with party affiliation and they're nominated through the caucus process, and they're not required to get additional signatures like the council. But if they want to run without party affiliation, there's really no mechanism for them to do so. So I sent the question to Bill Lee to do some research on, And he basically said that, yeah, there really is no provision. So the current charter would require them to file a declaration of candidacy in order to run unaffiliated, and they wouldn't get any signatures. And I had mentioned to him that I was hoping to remove that section, which this commission has voted to remove that section because it's redundant with the candidate's consent form. So he agreed that for now, with the charter as it is, that would be the mechanism for someone to run without party affiliation, but did recommend that this commission should make a proposed change to send to the voters to add Kennebec Water District trustees to the nomination process section and require them to also get signatures so that would be consistent with how other people obtain a position on the ballot.
Thank you, Patty. Does anybody want to raise their hand for questions?
Yes.
Go ahead, Julian.
Patty, you don't always run for that position either though, right? Because like myself, I was appointed. How would it affect appointments because I'm unenrolled now, independent? How would that affect that?
For this seat, it is an elected position. It's always an elected position. So in their bylaws, it says that they're elected in the same manner as other elected officials within the community. But because our charter didn't specify how many signatures they would get, it was always kind of a convoluted process. So they did not have them collect signatures in the past and only went through the caucus process. But in short, yes, these are elected positions, not appointed.
Okay. Thank you.
Kathy, I saw your hand up first. Kathy, you're still on mute.
Patty, why wouldn't it be 25 like any other elected position?
It's actually between 15 and 25, which is the number that the council requires and the school board. Not less than 50 and not more than 25. 15 and 25.
Because running for the council, you have to have 25, correct?
Oh, is it 25 to 50? Oh, I guess I'm not sure why, but that's what Bill recommended. A different number because it could be from anyone within the city. So that's what he recommended. I guess that's up for debate. Whatever number you pick is adequate, is fine.
Rianne, you got your hand up?
Yeah, I just want to say, Patty, I've gotten into, let's not say trouble, but trouble before for not properly noticing a caucus for the water district. But in reading section 9 right now, it doesn't say that they're needed at all. It doesn't, I mean, all it says is each ward caucus may nominate a candidate for city councilor, member of the Board of Education, and charter commission, and that each city caucus may nominate one candidate for mayor. So does that mean that, much like the previous section we were discussing, that we've been inaccurately applying the charter to these positions?
Well, that's certainly debatable because, again, the bylaws of private and special law that established the Kennebec Water District trustees says that they're elected in the same manner as other elected officials in the city. So because the caucus system has been so strong here in the city of Waterville, that's how they've always been nominated. We've never had a request in my tenure for anyone to run without party affiliation. So it really hasn't even been a question up until now. So I guess we've followed the procedure that we've done for the other seats. I guess it's debatable whether it was overkill on our part, but that was the process that we've been following.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Kathy, you still have your hand up. Was that from before? Or do you have another question?
Oh,
for Patty?
no, wrong, no.
All right. Does anybody else have any questions for Patty? All right. Does anybody have a motion?
I have a motion. I would motion under section 9 to add the water district trustees to the list of nominated candidates at caucus. And then I would like to require the signatures to follow the office of the mayor, which is that they must be signed by a minimum of registered voters, which is at least 15, but not more than 25 from each of the 7 wards of the city, since this is a citywide position.
All right, thank you, Ryan. Can you repeat the first part of that, Ryan?
The first part of it would just add the water district trustee to the list of candidates that can be nominated at caucus.
Thank you.
Could I speak to your motion, Rian, before we go through a round of discussions?
Sure, yeah.
Yes.
I would be cautious in the number of signatures simply because the mayor usually has a group of people, you know, campaigning for that person. They have fundraising and that sort of thing. This is a Kennebec Water District trustee position. Chances are they're not doing fundraising. They don't have volunteers helping them get on the ballot and that sort of thing. And I would be afraid that we would end up with no one running for those seats if we make it too prohibitive with the number of signatures that they need to get and requiring them from different wards around the city that they may not even know people in.
Okay, so I'm willing to drop the threshold to, 5, but not more than 10 from each of the 7 wards. But I do think it's since this is a citywide position, I do think we need to follow that they need to get signatures from every ward. So I'll drop it down to 5, but not more than 10.
James? James?
Sorry, yes, Julian?
Yeah, I echo Patty's concerns, even dropping it down, you know, to go across the whole city, it's very preclusive. I mean, you look at the mayor, he has to get 25 from each ward. It's not a very heavily sought after position. And the signatures are only allowing you to get on the ballot. The voters still have the choice whether to elect one of the 2 or 3 candidates, or they might be the only candidate. So I think in this case, I don't necessarily think that it has to come from 7 different wards. I think just getting on and letting the voters decide at that point. And I'm sure in the past you have trouble even applying for that position. So I think it could be a lot of red tape. Thank you.
All right. Was there anybody who wants a second Ryan's motion?
I will.
All right. Thank you, Tom. Discussion, Kathy.
No, I have nothing other than I do agree with Julian on that.
Thank you. Julian just went. Tom.
No, nothing, James.
Ron.
No, because I really have to go with what Bill Lee wants.
Me, I'd be in support of the motion. Hillary.
So I'm definitely in agreement of the first part of the motion. The second part, I understand the reasoning behind it. I'm not sure, Rianne, that the people who step up to serve on the water district are I just feel like there are so few that step forward to do it, but maybe I'm wrong on this. I guess I was leaning more towards the signature requires following the offices of City Council, Board of Education, Charter Commission, 25, but not more than 50. I don't, you were saying you were interested or you'd be willing to lower it to 5 to 15, but from each ward. And I guess I would much rather see it something like 25, no more than 50, with at least a signature from each ward. Maybe that is something that you would be amenable to you. But I'm really worried that we're setting a really high bar for this, but maybe I'm wrong. Am I missing something, Rianne?
I just think if you're running for a citywide position, finding 5 voters in each ward is not that high of an ask at all.
Rhiannon, do you want to say more on the motion?
No, I'll just, say what I said. If you're running for a citywide position, finding 5 voters from each ward to sign your nominating papers should not be a bar that we're setting as too high for a position. That's going to require 35 signatures, which is in the middle of that 25 to 50. And I guess I don't see it as too high of a bar to hit to understand that you have the support from the entire city. And 5 voters inside of a ward is really not that hard to do. You could do a whole family unit, and that could be one of your signatures from them.
Thank you. Sam?
I don't have anything to add.
Thank you. Ludi?
I don't really have anything to add either.
And Phil?
So we're looking to add 5 signatures for the water district. What was the second part of that motion again? Sorry.
The first part of the motion was allowing them to be nominated at caucus. And the second part of the motion was requiring at least 5, but no more than 10 signatures from each ward.
Okay, nothing to add.
Thank you, Phil. All right, so we'll move to a vote on.
James, I have my hand raised. I'm sorry.
Oh, I'm sorry. Go
Okay.
ahead.
I just wanted to say, I know a lot of people who don't even know what ward they live in. So Rhiannon, I understand what you're saying. I'm just saying a lot of people don't even know what ward they live in. So you can know a lot of people, or you could know people from church. You could be friends with people whose kids are on the basketball team and still not know what ward they live in. You still might know them and not even know where they live. So I don't know about this one.
Well, that's kind of my point, is you shouldn't be able to go to church and collect 25 signatures of everybody who lives in Ward 6 because they all happen to go to church at the local church, which is across the street from my house. And
I know.
all of a sudden I'm on the ballot for a citywide position. I don't think it's unreasonable to say that somebody running for a citywide position needs signatures from the entire city.
I'm just thinking about my friend Jeff, who is on the water district, who does go to my church, and I think he does a phenomenal job. I honestly don't know if he would know. He knows not a lot of people. I don't know if he would know that where they all live and what wards they live in. So
and that's some education for him, and he can knock
Yeah.
doors. We shouldn't be
Yeah, and
creating a situation in which people running for an elected office that represents the entire city somehow don't have to have the support of the entire city.
And if we had 10 people running for the water district, I would totally be in agreement with you. We just don't.
James, I have a question.
Sure.
So what happens if we put this language in, and I echo Hillary's concerns? The person just said, I'm not doing it because I'm not going to drive to 7 wards and pick out 5 signatures. Now we can't bend our charter to accept them. And you could potentially have a situation where we have created this seat as vacant by the stringent requirements. I really don't believe these positions are sought after. You probably almost have to beg someone to do it. And we won't be able to backtrack at that point, and we might be left in the dust with no representative with this. And that's my real concern. I would be happier to see it as an ordinance rather than baked into the charter for good for the next 7 years. Thank you.
All right. So, I mean, I suppose you also have the option of, if Rhiannon's motion doesn't pass, coming up with your own motion that is more in line with what you're thinking. But let's move to a vote. Nobody's got their hands up. Kathy?
No.
Julian,
No.
Tom,
No.
Ron,
No.
James is a yes. Hillary,
No.
Brienne,
I'm a yes.
Sam,
Yes.
Ludi,
Yes.
and Phil.
No.
All right, so the motion does not pass. Does anybody else have a similar motion that they'd like to make on this issue?
Which section are we in? We are on. Are we
This is
just-
Article 9.
Section
Yep.
9. James,
yeah.
I'll,
I would like
Yeah.
to make a motion. I would
On
like
this,
to-
on this, on this
Section
issue, Phil?
Section 9, yeah. I would like to make a motion to remove caucuses and party affiliation from elections for local for local offices.
Well, let's hold up on that motion for 1 second, because I think Hillary had a motion, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think she had a motion that was sort of following up on this last motion that did not pass. Is that correct, Hillary?
that's correct. So
All right. So
I
why don't we
basically
take
want to
your
make,
motion?
yes, I motion that we add Kennebec the water district to the first section of section 9. And then I would include that the number of signatures be at least 25, but not more than 50.
I second that motion.
All right. We'll do a quick round of discussion. Kathy, anything from you?
No. No.
Julian?
No, I think it makes it doable. Well, I shouldn't say no, sorry. Reflex action. I think it makes it doable. And like I said before, there's probably a shortage of candidates. We're lucky for people to serve. It won't lock the charter in to preclude people. Thank you.
Thank you. Tom?
No, James.
Ron?
No.
James? I have nothing. I would support the motion. Hillary?
Nope.
Rianne?
Yeah, I can't support this if we're not requiring at least one signature from each ward, because it's unconscionable to me that somebody can run for a citywide office and doesn't have to collect signatures from each ward. Again, they could collect 25 signatures from Ward 3. They could, go get Colby students to all sign this, and all of a sudden they're the candidate, and God knows nobody else supports them in the entire city, but they're the candidate because they got signatures from one ward. Unless we're requiring signatures from every ward, I can't support this.
Okay, so what if we amend it to include at least one signature from each ward? Are you saying you would support it?
I'll support that, yes.
Okay, I'm okay with that. Can I amend my motion?
You can.
Okay, I amend my motion to have signatures of at least 25, not more than 50, with at least one signature from each ward.
I'll second
Can I get-
that.
Thank
Okay,
you.
Second from Rianne.
And I'm assuming that also includes the caucus nomination then.
Yep.
Okay.
All right, Kathy, any discussion from you?
You didn't go around everyone else.
Well, the motion got amended, so I'm
Because of the
starting
amendment?
over.
Yeah.
I agree with what Hillary just stated.
Okay, Julian?
No, I don't think, I think it's red tape. I understand Rian's sentiment that you would like to be nominated by the whole city, but when you're only looking at 25 signatures, whether they come from any ward, it doesn't make much sense to me because you're basically saying you need these signatures from other wards to prove that you can be nominated across the city. But when it's only one signature or two, I mean, even Charles Manson can get one signature in each ward, in my opinion. So I think it's redundancy and duplication, and people will sign in any ward. So I don't see it's needed. Thank you.
Thanks, Julian. Tom?
Sorry about that, guys. I was muted for a second. This is an interesting one for me because I really do. I understand what both sides of this position are saying. I mean, on the one hand, when you're looking at a citywide position, shouldn't there be some citywide involvement in terms of, kind of the nomination process? I understand that. By the same token, I'm concerned about getting people to even run for these positions in the first place. I don't know that they're very well sought after. I could be wrong about that. And so I am just speculating, but I'd hate to put people in a position that would otherwise run, but they're like, geez, I'm not going to truck it all the way out to, to Ward X or Ward Y or Ward A, B, and C in order to do this. But just because it might be tedious. I get both sides of it. I think I'm inclined to support it, but I see both sides of it. Interestingly enough, and this may sound really backward, but I would be even more inclined to support a vote like this or a proposal like this for someone who's actually running for city council, understanding that they're only representing one ward, but what they do with their one ward has such an enormous impact throughout the city that I actually think that it would make even more sense in that situation. But I am inclined to support this position.
Thanks, Tom. Ron.
Yeah, no comment on this motion.
All right, thanks. I don't have any comments. I support the motion. Hillary?
No, I'll just say if it's voted down, we'll go back to another proposal because I think it's important to have something in here.
Thank you. Rhiannon?
I'm just again going to reiterate, if you're running from a citywide position, knocking on one door from each ward in the city and getting a signature is not that hard of an ask. And the entire city can vote for you, so you might as well signify that you have support from at least one person who's going to vote for you from every single ward in the city.
Sam?
I have nothing to add. I support the motion.
Thank you. Moody?
Yeah, I support the amended motion because I understand the importance of citywide support. But I also get the issue with getting people to run, but it's such a low bar of getting at least one signature from all the wards that it just makes perfect sense to me. And I think this could be a really great, reasonable compromise vote for us as a charter commission. So I'm just hoping that it works.
Thanks, Ludi. Phil?
Nothing to add.
All right. So let's take a vote. Kathy?
Yes.
Julian?
No.
Tom?
Yes.
Ron?
No.
James is a yes. Hillary?
Yes.
Rhiannon?
Yes.
Sam?
Yes.
Ludi?
Yes.
And Phil?
Yes.
All right, the motion passes 8-2. Okay, so Phil, I'll take your motion. That'll be the last motion. Then we'll move on to the next item because we're running out of time. But Phil, if you just want to sort of re-articulate that, go ahead.
Yeah, I moved a motion to remove caucuses and party affiliation from nomination of candidates and for candidate declaration of candidacy, and just making it a declaration of candidacy requirement.
All right, is there a second?
I'll second it for discussion.
All right, moving to discussion. Kathy?
I think I'd like to hear what the others are saying first.
Julian?
I'd like to amend the motion to separate the two issues involved. There seems to be two issues, one on removing party affiliation and one on amending the caucus system. And so I will make that motion I will ask Bill if he can withdraw and resubmit the motion to put the two separate issues out there, because there definitely appears to be two issues. Do you want DNR next to your name, and do you want caucuses? And it's a nice thought, but I'm wondering if he's making this motion to remove the caucus, what does he envision for the new voting system? How would it be chosen? Would it be on going to the ballot to elect for people? So I have some questions on that as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Julian. Phil, are you willing to amend your motion?
I believe the two motions go hand in hand. You know, the party affiliation kind of goes with the caucuses, right?
Okay. All right. We'll move on with the discussion and we'll get to you last. Tom.
You know, I do think that I agree with Julian that I think they're two separate, that they really would be better suited as two separate motions. At the same time, I mean, I'm inclined to agree with it. A lot of the feedback that I was getting when I spoke to city councilors, you know, early on in this process was that they were not in favor of caucuses, that they thought it discouraged people from being engaged in the political process and running for office. And I think that everybody on this committee wants to do just the opposite. We want to encourage more people to be involved and to have better candidates. So, you know, we may not necessarily agree on how to do that, but I think we all agree that that's something that we want to do. And, you know, so taking the caucus situation out of this, and I don't know if that means just running everything through a primary, or how that would necessarily manifest itself. But I think that there's some simplicity there that's to be valued. The other end of it, I think, is as far as party affiliations are concerned. I know that's something that, you know, we basically do on in every election, you know, on every level. But I think that removing Ds and Rs and Is and any other affiliation may encourage the population to get engaged and to get involved and learn a little bit more about who's running for office. And I think that knowledge can really benefit us as a society, instead of just saying, well, look, this is, you know, I vote a party line, so I'm just going to pick out that letter and go with it. It may be helpful to say, you know, I'm not going to have that benefit here. I need to learn a little bit about who it is that's running and what their platform is and whether I agree with it. I think there's some value in that.
Thanks, Tom. Ron.
Yes, I don't know that I fully understand what Phil has here. I'm going to wait and listen to everybody that's going to be speaking here this evening, but I do believe I believe in the I's and D's, because if you don't have an R and D after a person's name, you do not know what this person stands for, no matter what he might say when he knocks on your door. Because if he says one thing that he thinks you want to hear, and that's not what the R and D means, then again, you're going to have problems. Now, I do realize that when we ran for the Charter Commission, we did not have any I's and D's. I'm thinking if I put a R after my name, I would not be here this evening. So again, I want to hear more from Phil before I can really make many intelligent comments.
Thanks, Ron. Next, I'm not in favor of the motion. Hillary.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to separate the two things out, Phil. I think there might be a good argument to be made. So talking about them separately, there are a lot of people who don't run because they can't physically make a caucus. I've always found it to be prohibitive. And as we're looking at caucuses in the midst of a pandemic, it's confusing. I like the idea of anyone who wants to run throwing their hat in and getting signatures. So I kind of like that idea in terms of party affiliation. Tom, your sentiment I agree with, but in practice, it doesn't really work that way. We have neighboring towns that don't have party affiliation on the ballot. And I've had people say there isn't enough online presence for candidates. So they often have a really hard time getting information about the candidates. People who have more money then often get elected because they've had the money to spend on advertising. And an absence of a party label, I think a lot of times it just confuses people because it doesn't remove your party affiliation. It just prohibits it from appearing on a ballot. And I think there are an awful lot of people, whether we agree with it or not, there are an awful lot of people, as Ron said, that maybe use that as a determining factor when they vote. I'm not sure that that's the best way to vote, but I think it's up to a person to decide if that is the way that they want to vote. And I'll say, if anybody's curious, there's actually been really interesting research on this particular topic that I've read about before. And a lot of times when there's in the absence of a party affiliation and people aren't informed, when we're talking municipal offices, right? Because I think a lot of people do know, who might be running for president or maybe, Congress. What ends up happening is it's a lot of times who appears first on the ballot. So there's an alphabetical sometimes order benefit. Sometimes it can lead to any other cue, somebody's ethnicity that might be revealed in their name. So those aren't necessarily great ways of determining how you vote for someone. Right or wrong, I would just say the research sort of indicates that it doesn't work in practice the way we'd like it to. So I Phil, if it doesn't pass and you're interested in separating these two out, I might be in favor of getting rid of caucuses.
Thanks, Hillary. VN.
I kind of want to echo what's been said with a couple other people, that I wish this had been split into two motions, because I'm definitely in favor of removing these convoluted caucuses that prohibit a lot of people from attending and a lot of people from participating and getting nominated. But I'm very pro party affiliation. A lot of people in my ward are pro-party affiliation, board with the fact that party affiliation is an indication of values. And if they haven't done their research, and a lot of voters are low information voters, having a D or R next to your name at least gives an indication of where your value system lies, in terms of how you're going to govern, I guess. But having run caucuses for the last, I think I've run them for 6 years. I will just say there are many, 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 many issues with caucuses, and I would just like to do away with them entirely. I think there are a lot of people who support the sentiment of doing away with caucuses. But because this is a motion that is bundled together with party affiliation, I cannot support removing party affiliation from the ballot.
Thanks, Rhian. Sam.
Yeah, I think I would just echo a lot of what Rhian just said. I think that they're two very separate issues, and I'd rather separate them and talk about them that way.
All right, James, looks like the best way to go would be then to amend the motion to remove caucuses. That would be one of the motions that I make, and then I would have another motion after this one is discussed. So my first motion would be to remove caucuses, the requirement for candidates to be elected for political offices.
Can I ask, Phil, what you would replace that with?
Well, candidate just declaring the candidacy, getting a petition, getting the signatures, and getting on the ballot.
So you would have multiple people be able to have a D next to their name while running?
Well, I'm not in favor. That's a second motion that we can discuss after. But this particular motion is just to make sure to discuss the caucus, because eventually my second motion would be to remove party affiliation from election ballots. So you can have people running for political office for city council, as many, can gather signatures, put their name on a petition, and submit it to the city clerk and be sworn in, and have their signatures validated, and let the people decide if they're the best person to be able to represent them in the city.
Right. So you're saying, but your motion, because you're doing it in this order, you're essentially saying you would remove caucuses, but then everybody would still be able to go on the ballot with their party affiliation. So you would have multiple Ds and multiple Rs running for the ballot. Can I suggest that you flip them and that you do party affiliation first and then remove caucuses?
If that makes sense. I don't know.
That order makes sense to me, if we flip it.
Yeah, so it sounds like Phil, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're going to withdraw your original motion, which we had just had discussion on, and you're going to separate it into two separate motions. The first of which is your motion to eliminate party affiliation on ballots, correct?
Yes.
Okay, sounds good. So let's, is there a second on Phil's motion?
I'll second that.
All right, Julian seconds. So let's go through discussion. Kathy?
Oh, I agree with Phil. Of course, we know in Waterville we have large voting issues as it is. So I do agree with him that it would be good to eliminate the R and the D.
Julian?
Yeah, I think it's about the most divisive thing in Waterville. I know Republicans that vote Democrat on most of their votes, and Democrats that vote more the Republican way, but they might identify as a Democrat for certain core values within that party. So I don't necessarily believe it tells you what you're getting. However, as much as I respect Phil's motion, I can pretty much predict this Charter Commission will shoot it down, because it's a free handicap to, in my opinion, elect candidates when they're not always as qualified. I've seen very good Republicans lose, and I've seen Democrats run that never even got out of bed, never had a flyer, never had a sign, and ran purely on that ticket. And there was a talk at the time with the ward system, better candidates. If you want to get better candidates, you really need to remove a little tag next to someone's name, and let's get the most qualified people up there. And I think it's really precluding a lot of people. But, you know, like I said, they know it's a free lunch. And I can personally speak, when I was only able to vote as little as about 6 years ago or 7 years ago, when I finally got my USA citizenship. And I know the first vote I ever went to was for president, and I went in the booth and ticked, and I was kind of antsy, and really I saw the local elections, and I'm a local. I don't know any of these people. What's going on? I voted for Karen Heck because it said heck yes. I didn't know the other person. There was all these other positions, school board. I really didn't know the importance of them. I took my pen and went down the line, D, and got out as quick as I could. Did I know the candidates? No. And I think I did possibly a disservice to some of the candidates. So I completely support Phil's motion, but I would bet my bottom dollar that they're going to hang on to a free lunch. So good luck with that one, Phil. Thank you.
Tom?
Yeah, sorry about that, guys. No, I think I've already spoke on this. Thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Ron?
Yes, not having a D, I'm thinking when somebody comes to Pine Street and knocks on my door and he's a stranger and I don't know whether to believe him or not, he gives me a brochure and I look at those bullet points, and those bullet points should pretty well tell me, you know, if his basic philosophy is Republican or Democrat. I think I need that better than having no information at all. So I would have to say, as much as I have mixed feelings on this, I think my final thought process is that I would like R&D. That might not be sure proof, but it gives me a little bit of indication whether this person has the same basic beliefs that I do.
Thanks, Ron. Next, I'll just say that I'm not in support of the motion. Hillary?
Yeah, I would say, I think Ron just gave an example, and Julian, you did too. Whether you should have voted that way or not, you did. It is a queue, and it's a queue for an awful lot of people. And so, you know, people might have the money to knock doors and produce a lot of print literature so that you have it. And if they don't, what Ron's saying is that queue helps inform him. And so I think, again, in practice, I really like the idea of removing them, but the research suggests that it really doesn't work that way. And again, it doesn't accomplish, Julian, I think what you would really like to see accomplished when you talk about divisiveness. It doesn't remove the party affiliation, right? It just removes it on paper. So the divisiveness isn't on paper, the divisiveness is in practice. That's something we all just need to work on together. But the letter behind your name, whether it's a D or an R or an I, doesn't peg you in my book as being divisive.
Was that a question to me?
No, I'm saying it doesn't. In my mind, it doesn't. Yeah.
Thanks, Hillary. Sam?
Wait, you skipped me.
Oh, I'm sorry, man. Skipped it over you. Sorry.
Not that I have anything to add, because I actually think that I really second what Ron said wholeheartedly, and I don't have anything to add to that.
Right. Thank you, Sam.
I don't have anything to add.
Thank you, Ludi.
I think I get what Tom was saying earlier, but in practice, I really don't know if it works. So Hillary made some really good points in our earlier discussion, and I really do get what Ron was just saying. So I'm not in support of the motion, but mainly because when I spoke with people as part of my subcommittee, something Colleen said really resonated with me. She said that we should preserve partisan elections because they get people involved in local politics when they know that they have the support of a larger organization and people behind them with those similar beliefs. So that stuck with me.
Thanks, Ludi. Phil.
Yeah, as a couple of people have said, you know, being somebody who ran for city council and been involved with city politics for a really long time, I can for sure, and with somebody who has sat on election day out there greeting people, party affiliation plays a role into people decide, into how people decide how they vote in the election. And that role is most often not representative of the value that they would hope that their candidate would have, right? Because a letter in front of a name does not reflect the values of a candidate, right? The actions and the bullet and the talking points for candidates reflect what their values are, right? And most often people vote not because they have actually learned about the candidate or know about the candidate, which again, is up to the candidate to get himself known. And you don't need a lot of money to knock on doors. You don't need money, right? I ran a campaign. I think my campaign was about, it was less than $500, right, that I ran on. And I knocked on every single doors on the ward. And most often than not, unfortunately, the first thing that some people will ask you when you knock on the door is, are you a Republican or a Democrat? Not what do you believe on? What do you believe in? What do you value as a person? So they can learn about what you want and what you want to bring to the city, not just because you want to align yourself with the party in order to be able to move forward. Because we would hope that, you know, party wouldn't rule us as city. We would hope that people and ideas would rule us as a city, and people with values and things that are positive, and uplifting, and wants to help them move forward. But most often than not, that's not the case. We have candidates who are out there who align themselves with a political party just because they know that they're going to get a crap load of constituents who live in a certain part of the ward to come vote for them. And they know that they don't have to get out of bed and they have to promote themselves in order to be elected. And that happened times and times again. And in some areas, they're Republican, in some areas, they're Democrat. But I would hope that as a city, we would want people to run, not because they belong to a party, not because a party is telling them what to do, but because they believe as individuals that they can bring about change, that they can bring about positive change. And their ideas about change is what they go out in the community and promote. And they don't go out in the community and promote which party they belong to. right? And removing that from the ballot would actually help, I believe it will help people get involved a little more to actually try to research, about the candidate. And it will encourage candidates to actually get out and promote themselves a little more instead of just relying on the fact that, well, a voter is going to see a D or an R in front of a name, and they will vote accordingly. Even though they don't realize, they might not realize that what they believe on might not necessarily be what the person who has a letter in front of their name believes on, right? And we're talking about divisiveness. Yes, party affiliation has been divisive. It's true, not because there's a name on the paper, but because we as people have put, our values more on parties than we do on people, right? We have decided that we're going to let parties dictate how we think and what we believe, instead of just, being as people, presenting ideas as a community, not as faction that belong to a certain village, a certain party, a certain party in your community. Instead, coming together and making decisions as individuals and as communities. And I believe that at a community level, party affiliation is important. It's important. We need that for higher offices, for all these things. But I believe that at a local level, where we are all just neighbors and we walk the same street, we shop the same stores, we don't need party affiliations. That is something that we are one of the last municipalities that still does that for local offices. Nobody caucuses, and most cities have removed party affiliation because of the divisiveness that it brings, right? Not only through the election process and even through people canvassing their ward and just trying, to be a person, an agent of change in their community, and just get shut down because, there's party affiliation involved within the whole process. And not only, it also discourages people from running. It discourages people from running because as a candidate, if I know I live in this particular ward, and in this particular ward, I mean, the people who are in it are the 70%, Democrat or Republican, and we know historically people only vote party lines. Why would I be encouraged to go and put myself in the hat when I know that people are not going to care what it is that I have to bring forward? All they care about is pretty much which party I belong to. And the R and the D, like I said before, they don't stand for what people, they don't speak to what people stand for. I believe in a lot of democratic values, and I believe in Republican values. But most of that, I believe in ideas and facts and common sense that unites people, that brings people together. That's what I believe in. And that's what, as a candidate, I would hope, right, that people will hear from me, will know about me, not just because, well, I belong to a party, so therefore they will assign a train of thought to me, right? I would hope that as City Charter Commission, we will now want people to be assigned thoughts just because they belong to a party, because we say a party defines who they are as an individual, which is, I believe, completely false. Let's see. Yeah, so again, I'm strongly in favor of, removing party affiliation and try to get us away from thinking that, because you belong to a certain party, you must think a certain way, because this is how we have been bringing divisiveness into our community. And I think that we are to start showing people that we want people to get along a little more and a little better than just assuming that somebody believes in certain things or thinks a certain way because they belong to a political party.
All right, move to a vote. Kathy.
James?
Yeah. Oh, Jules has something.
James?
What, Julian?
Before you bring it to vote, can I just get some clarification from Rian, what Rian was referring to by low information voters?
No, we'll move to a vote. Kathy.
Yes.
Julian.
100% yes.
Tom.
Yes.
Ron.
No.
James is a no. Hillary.
No.
Rian.
Sorry, I am a no.
Sam.
No.
No.
Phil.
Yes.
All right, the motion does not pass. So we've got 2 items left. Phil, you're gonna have to bring up your other motion. Next meeting, you should email it to both, just email Tom and Rianne, and they'll get it on the agenda. Next on the agenda is discussion by Rianne, confirmation of finalized articles to send to Bill Lee. So go ahead, Rianne.
So we had decided at Patty's suggestion to send sections to Bill as we finish them. And I would just like to confirm that there are, and again, based on the discussion of emergency powers, which I think is going to fall under either its own article or it's going to be attached to a different article. I would just like to confirm that I can send articles 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 to Bill Lee to review. So if anybody has any motions that they would like to make to those 8 motions, they should, or those 8 articles, they should probably say so now. Otherwise, I'd like to motion that I send to Bill Lee to review the changes documented in Articles 1 through 8. And that is a motion.
So moved.
All right, so it was motion and seconded. Does anybody object to this motion? Does anybody want to say something?
James, I just had a question because he kind of faded out. Article
go ahead.
1 through 5.
It's Articles 1 through 8. So it includes everything. It would include the grant of powers to the city, the mayor, the city manager, the city council, administrative organization, the code of ethics, city finances, and administration of schools, though I am just now realizing that I should not send section 7, which is the city finances. So it would be everything but city finances that I just listed.
Anybody else have any questions for Rianne? All right, well, let's take a vote to send the revisions that we've made to Articles 1 through 6, as well as 8 to Billy. Kathy,
Yes.
Julian,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Ron,
Yes.
James is a yes. Hillary,
Yes.
Rianne,
Yep.
Sam,
Yes.
Ludi,
Yes.
Phil.
Yes.
All right, perfect. All right, so last item on the agenda before we adjourn. Ron had a good question, and it's probably more directed towards Patty and perhaps Bill, but maybe Patty can sort of fill in what she knows right now. And I think Ron, but you can expound upon this. Your question was, how are the revisions that we make actually going to get presented to the voters? Does that sum up your inquiry, Ron?
Yes, I see it's 8:01. Patty, will you be here for the next meeting on Tuesday?
The next meeting is actually Wednesday, I believe, because the council meets on Tuesday.
Wednesday, right.
Yes, I can be if need be.
Yes, I think seeing it's a little past 8, instead of rushing through this, I'd rather wait and have it on the agenda for next Wednesday, because I would like the clear explanation that I know that Patty can tell me on what happened on November 4th, 2014. I just want to know basically the format, what the voters are going to see on the ballot. To be honest with you, I vote every election, and all I can remember is voting for the president and the governor and some referendums and things such as that. But I really do not understand what the voters are going to be seeing when they go to the polls this November. And if I don't fully understand, I'm sure that a lot of my constituents don't understand as well. And I'd like to nab Patty before she leaves us to give me an explanation of what we can expect to see as far as on the ballot and whether they're going to be able to maybe see some of this in the newspaper. I just don't understand what is going to be on the ballot and how people are going to decide what to vote for. So that's what I'd like to bring up. But again, I just can wait and have it on the agenda next Wednesday.
That sounds good to me.
Yeah, okay, that sounds good to me. That sounds perfect.
James,
Yeah,
before we break tonight, I have two very quick questions.
sure.
Okay, Hillary was mentioning earlier about moral turpitude. How did we leave it regards the items of past criminal records precluding certain positions? Is that, I missed that part. Are we over with that discussion? Is it staying as it is? Has that been closed?
I actually can't recall exactly what we did. That was at the very beginning. Maybe Rian recalls off the top of his head because he's the sleuthing secretary.
So nobody made a motion to make any changes to the moral turpitude after Hillary presented Subcommittee C's findings. So right now it is as is, and we did just vote to send to Billy by a vote of 10-0. Sections 1 through 6
Okay.
and section 8. So
I guess that got by me, but I was thinking, as to Hillary's concern earlier, good character for the city manager. What is moral turpitude? Did we actually want that in there? But I missed the boat on that. But if anyone feels strongly enough, I'm not sure.
Julian, I do want to say that we did strip the character references from city manager.
Yes, we did. Yeah.
Yes. So we did vote to strip the character references based on the fact that they're historically been there due to
Right,
reasons to discriminate.
and I kind of feel that moral turpitude is also quite subjective. So I'm not sure if we still wanted that in there. The vote might have sailed on it, but if anyone feels strongly, they can mention it tonight. And the last thing is, I'm definitely not opposed to what the finance director was mentioning. All I need to vote to remove that permanently is just to get an okay from the city manager, his actual boss, just for someone above the finance director, in charge of the finance director, to maybe Mike can come to the next meeting or write a note and just say, yes, you have my blessing to strip this before I vote on that. Thank you.
Would you
Thanks,
like
Julian.
me to ask? Would you like me to ask Mike Roy if he supports those motions?
Or if you send him the actual language that was proposed by Aaron and ask if he okays the removal of all of it, or if he has any concerns. If not, I would happily vote to remove that at the next
Yes,
session.
I can definitely do that.
Okay, thank you.
All right, perfect. So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Ooh, I'll make that motion.
All
I'll
right,
second.
perfect. Kathy,
Yes.
Julian,
Yes.
Tom,
Yes.
Ron.
Yes, and good evening.
Thanks, Ron. James is the yes. Hillary,
Yes.
Brienne,
Heck yes.
Sam,
Yes.
Ludi,
Yes.
Phil.
Yes.
All right, good night, everyone.
Thank you, James.
Good night.